give attention to it. Yeah.
Actually, I find walking and chanting and driving bicycle and chanting not much of a difference.
It can be, but to walk is easier than ride a bike. You remove one level of concentration. Yeah, for some people walking's not good. Sitting, of course, in one place is... You're able to concentrate. But riding a bike, it just adds another level of... You know, the whole idea is you have to if you have to concentrate on something else, then it takes away concentration from chanting. Yes.
So regarding an attention, sometimes we hear that devotees are encouraged to chant good 16 rounds, and if you have time, you can chant extra rounds. And those extra rounds, yeah.
Chant extra bad rounds.
Bad rounds. So
yeah, because the instruction is to always be chanting. So chanting extra bad rounds is probably better than listening to your mind, right?
There's not an offense then?
That's an interesting question. And if you ask 100 Maharajas, you'll probably get 100 different rounds. Yeah, do that for sure. And what did Prabhupada say? 16 on the bead, unlimited off the bead. So yeah, so the instruction is we should always be chanting. But especially chanting on beads, that should be attentive. So anything that we're doing that distracts our attention from the holy name is a definition of inattention. But I will say that I memorized the whole second chapter of Bhagavad Gita while I was driving a van on a highway. But there were no cars on this highway, so it didn't take much attention to drive. So my attention was, I could learn verses. And I was going somewhere at 3 a.m. and I was going to be busy till maybe 7 p.m. and also tired. So making all the proper calculations, the best time to chant was when I was driving, rather than come home at 8:30 at night and sit down and try to chant, because I would be very tired. But I have to tell you, those were some of the best rounds I've ever chanted, and I'll explain why. At 3 a.m. it's dark, so I couldn't see anything. So I wasn't distracted by anything. But there are no cars on the road, and I've been driving since I'm 16, so it takes me very little effort to drive. So me driving and chanting at 3 a.m. is basically like sitting in a car and chanting with someone else driving. It took a little effort, and I chanted amazing rounds. So it can happen. So, you know, we have general principles, but we can also sometimes chant. Maybe you chant your best rounds riding your bike. I can't say you don't. But it's a general principle. If something takes attention away from your japa, it takes attention away from your japa. All right. You can ride with your eyes closed and chant. Maybe that works for you. I have studied this. Riding bikes and chanting japa. I have studied it because so many devotees in Mayapur do it. And they really don't look very absorbed. That's what my conclusion is. They don't look like they're absorbed in hearing that well. So, I want to read you something which I think you'll find interesting. It's about the 10th offense. The 10th offense has, who knows the 10th offense? To not have complete faith, chanting of holy names, and to maintain material attachments. It's also offensive to be inattentive. So what does it mean to maintain material attachments? What does to not maintain material attachments means? If one's material attachments cause one to lose faith in the holy name, that is an offense. It doesn't mean that a person who has faith in the holy name is an offender because they have some material attachments remaining in them. We all have material attachments. It's natural to be attached to family, work, etc., possessions. The question is whether we use them in Krishna's service or allow them to deviate or destroy us, to maintain attachments beyond our needs. In other words, we don't maintain destructive attachments. Now, we all have some attachment, right? To our body, to our family, right? To our shoes. We got some really nice shoes in China. They're like trekking shoes because we were going someplace very cold and wet and muddy. So the devotee bought me these like really good shoes. Now I'm attached to them. But I'm not so attached that it's an obstacle to my bhakti. But I was having a problem with my foot and I think the shoes cured it. So we all have some attachments. But are those attachments destructive to your bhakti? Are they beyond what you really need? Are they impediments? That's what it means. And that has been described by Sanatana Goswami. He actually talks about this as material attachments which are beyond one's needs and thus become impediments. That's what it means. Not that you have material attachments. Because if it were offense to have material attachments, everyone who chanted would be offending the holy name just because we're attached. Prabhu, why aren't you chanting your rounds today? Well, I just got this new dhoti and I'm so attached to it that if I chant, I'll be committing the 10th offense. But it's not like that. Right? Otherwise, we'd all be making offense. Yes? So, one nice explanation that's often given with the 10th offense is to think that I'm the body. That's the offense to the holy name is even after understanding so many instructions, you think you're not the body. You think you're the body. So now you're sitting there and thinking, oh, well, I think I'm the body, so I'm making the 10th offense. Not exactly. Not exactly what it means. Before you get ready to jump off the roof here, thinking that it's hopeless, I will tell you a story. And it's a very nice story, I think. And I think you're going to love this story. Turn to the devotee next to you and say, I think you're going to love this story. This story is very instructive. So, one of the leading book distributors during the time of Srila Prabhupada asked Prabhupada a question. He said, Prabhupada, if we dedicate our lives to book distribution, will we become self-realized? Perfectly good question. Right? This process alone, will we become self-realized? No, I think he said, if we go out every day on book distribution, will we become self-realized? Prabhupada said, if you're going out every day on book distribution, you already are self-realized. Because how could you go out every day if you thought you were the body? Now, what's so interesting about this, obviously none of the devotees who were going out every day thought they were self-realized, because their definition of self-realization was to completely disidentify from the body, gross and subtle, and be fully situated in Brahman realization, realizing I'm Atma and blissful and detached and not lamenting and so on, like we hear, Nasochiti, Nakamchiti, Brahma Bhuta Prasanam. But Prabhupada's definition was different. What did he say? Because you're going out every day, that means you are self-realized. What does that mean? It means you realize you're a servant of Krishna. You're not a servant of yourself. Otherwise, you couldn't go out every day. Isn't that interesting? So when we say to not identify with I and mine, even if we think this is my body, this is my husband, wife, this is my house, and so forth, because we're engaged in devotional service, it means actually we're not identifying with I and mine. It means we're identifying that I'm a servant of Krishna. I just haven't fully embodied it yet, right? So let's say, for example, you have some attachment, and you engage that attachment. You like to do something, you do it for Krishna, right? Because you're a devotee and you're well trained, you understand the philosophy, and the philosophy is you're not the enjoyer. So even though you're enjoying that in relation to Krishna, you understand in your head you're not the enjoyer, right? You have some understanding, because you wouldn't do that unless you could do it for Krishna. Like, I have this desire to do something. Oh, I want to make a movie, I want to do art, I want to write a book, I want to do a song, but you'll do it in Krishna consciousness. So that means you understand that Krishna is the enjoyer. You want to do it for his pleasure. So you're not really identified as Purusha, as the enjoyer. It's not really I and mine. So as long as, like we were saying yesterday, you have some ability and you don't identify with false ego who wants to grab and say it's me, and you understand, I like to do this service, Krishna's given me ability, and I understand it's coming from him and I do it for his pleasure, then you're okay. That's not material attachment. It's not identifying with I and mine. Is that good news? Aren't you happy you heard that? So, ladies and gentlemen, now you realize you're all self-realized, because you are engaged in devotional service, and that is the self is a devotee of Krishna, so you're self-realized. Congratulations, give yourself a big hand. You're all self-realized. Haribol. Pretty easy, right? That's Sanatana Goswami's definition of material attachment. It's an attachment which becomes an impediment. And you don't want to give it up. And it's destroying your bhakti. Is that all right? Okay. Now, okay. So now we're going to discuss, because I have some information on Vaishnava Aparadh, because it's such a big problem. I thought we could discuss it a little bit. And maybe there's some things you haven't discussed yet, and I'll read and discuss what I have here in my notes. The offense to a devotee is an offense to Krishna. Krishna is being offended by an offense to a devotee, even if the devotee doesn't take offense. Because sometimes we think, it's only going to be an offense if the devotee takes offense. But if the devotee is offended and the devotee himself doesn't take offense, it hurts Krishna. So it's true. So if we can inculcate this one idea, it will really help us. That if I offend you, I've offended Krishna, because you're Krishna's devotee. Because the only way we would continue offending devotees is to think that we're not offending Krishna. Or to think they're not really devotees. Or they're not very important devotees. Or I'm not really offending them. I'm just pointing out what's wrong with them. Yes?
Something which we touched upon, I think we could really
Okay.
It's family, husband and wife.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. This is a very good point. Husband and wife sometimes offend one another with pots, knives, pies in the face, whatever. And words, abrasive language. Or even sometimes worse in rare occasions, but sometimes abrasive, unkind words. We'll say unkind words. Now, when you study this topic, two things come up that qualify blasphemy, because we're talking about the first offense, and the first offense is to blaspheme a devotee who's dedicated his life to give other people the holy name. So the holy name, Krishna in the holy name, is attached to that devotee because he's helping other people chant. So what constitutes, strictly speaking, blasphemy? So what the acharyas have said, there's two things that constitute it. And generally these two things don't come up when husband and wife are arguing. One is hatred and one is envy. And that's why all the householders are still devotees. Otherwise, if they, if that constituted Vaishnava aparadha, I wouldn't recommend anyone getting married, because you would destroy yourself. Because inevitably you're going to have a fight, and you're going to make some offense. Of course you will apologize. But still, it was an offense. So, generally, between husband and wife, when they get in a fight, it's not because they hate one another, and it's not because they're envious of one another. I mean, maybe, but generally that doesn't go that far. And probably you've heard that sometimes Prabhupada has described what envy is, and he said envy is that you minimize the qualifications of a person. So if you're glorifying someone, I'll say, no, that can't be true. He's not like that. He could never do that. He does just the opposite of what you said. So Prabhupada told the story. Maybe a lot of you heard the story, but it exemplifies envy. He said the friends who were talking, that one of their friends became a high court judge. And so one of the friends was thinking, he couldn't possibly be a high court judge because he's not really qualified. So he was trying to minimize it. So this must be wrong. And they said, no, it's true, he is. And he was arguing that. And he was so envious that he said, well, if he is a high court judge, they must not be paying him the salary. There's some way he had to take what is real and then minimize it. So you're making up something, it's not real. Obviously he's being paid. So envy means to not recognize the quality of someone, pull them down, or create stories that aren't true. So if you stay long enough in ISKCON, someday you'll become a leader, then you can go on the internet and read stories about yourself that you never knew happened. Back in 1983, he did this. I didn't know I did that. That's interesting. Thanks for telling me I did that. I had no idea I did that. So that kind of thing. That's how the Acharyas describe blasphemy. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's cool. So I can fault find, and but I don't really hate you, so it's okay. Fault finding is different from blasphemy, but fault finding is also detrimental to bhakti. Because the devotee is supposed to cultivate humility. So if I'm fault finding, I'm not cultivating humility. So even if I wanted to write it off and say it's not a major aparad, but still it's considered an offense to a devotee. And offending a devotee doesn't help us. Now, sometimes we're friends, and our friend's wearing a funny hat, we make a joke. We do these things because that's the nature of human beings. But there's no vengeance there. There's no envy there. It's just, joking. You're that kirtan so-and-so led, yeah, I almost had a heart attack, it was so bad. We might say something like that. Actually, one time there was a kirtan going on, and it was so bad. It was like what I call jungle kirtan. Or factory kirtan or something like that. So Prabhupada was in his hut, and he asked one of his disciples, what do you think of that kirtan? And even if you didn't like it, you're not going to tell Prabhupada. Kirtan sounds like Aborigines, doing some ritual or something. And Prabhupada said, it's abominable. He said something like that, kirtan's abominable. So sometimes we might say something like that. That kirtan. There's no envy, there's no hatred, it's not technically blasphemy, but it certainly is fault-finding, and it doesn't help our bhakti. So, we were discussing this morning that there's certain qualities a devotee has, and although developing these qualities is not an essential aspect of bhakti, surrender is essential, but having these qualities is helpful. So listen to what Sanatana Goswami says. This is amazing. Are you ready? You want to hear something amazing? This is amazing. He said let's say you see a hungry person, and you're not hungry, and you have enough money to give this person money or buy him food to feed him, and you don't. There's no stricture in the angas of bhakti, the 64 items, to feed a poor person. Right? It's not you don't have to do it. He said, but if you don't, it means you're not cultivating mercy, and it's going to have a bad effect on your consciousness. Isn't that interesting? Because mercy is a quality of a devotee, so we should cultivate mercy. Or we're having an argument, so if I just say I'm sorry, even though I'm convinced it's your fault, at least I'm practicing humility. Or even if it's with just some person, in the world, and you're interacting, and you just take a humble position, it's actually good for your bhakti, because you're supposed to be cultivating humility. But we tend to think, oh, he's not a devotee, I don't have to be humble with him, right? Isn't it? Or what does it matter if I offend him, because he's not a devotee? But the point is, we're supposed to be humble, so it has a bad effect on our consciousness. So indirectly, it is a practice of bhakti. Or at least indirectly, it has a good effect, or a bad effect, depending how we do it. Isn't that interesting? Because we think, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to feed sadhus and beggars, personally. They'd come to the mat, they'd line them up outside the mat, and he'd feed them. And sometimes when they were, beggars would come when they were on parikrama, he would tell all his disciples to give them money or feed them, because if you don't, your heart will become hard. So the disciples are thinking, well, this isn't part of the practice of bhakti. If I don't feed them, I'm not committing any offense. But his point was, you'll become hard-hearted, because you'll go home and have a nice meal. You'll have your 5 gulab jamans, but they won't have anything, and it'll make your heart hard. You're too selfish. Isn't that interesting? So, we may find fault. It may not be out of anger, hatred, envy, but it doesn't help our bhakti. It's not the condition of a devotee to do that. So, and it doesn't help us trinadapi sunicina. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you get married, or if you are married, remember these words. Fighting is not good for your bhakti. Humility is good for your bhakti. Isn't that interesting? Don't you find that interesting? And his explanation is, these are all the qualities of a Vaishnava, so in every situation, we should practice them. Right? Somebody does something for you in the store. Thank you. Appreciate it. You're being humble. That's good. More likely to be humble with everyone else. Does that make sense? Anyone not like that? Or want to argue with that? Or have a question? Prabhu, do I have to be nice to my wife? That's like asking too much of me. Is that the question you were going to ask? You don't have to be, but it'll have a bad effect on you if you're not. Okay. Did that answer your question, or is that okay? You have something?
I mean, it's much more hopeful than I thought.
Yeah, let's see, the point is this. Let's go back to the discussion of material attachment. Unless we qualify what material attachment is, no one will be able to chant without offense. Because as conditioned souls, we start from that point of material attachment. And so we become devotees, but then we engage material attachments in Krishna service, and then we curb attachments that can't be engaged. So therefore they're not, this is not the meaning of material attachment. I know I'm a servant of Krishna, and I know I'm attached to this, and I use it in Krishna service, but I don't think that I'm the enjoyer, I don't think I'm the center, I don't think I'm the controller. It's connected to my psychophysio nature that I need certain things. It's dealing with, No, I wouldn't say it's an I and mine. It's dealing with, it's acknowledging where you're at and then engaging that in Krishna service. So that's not I and mine, because you engage it in the service.
So it means like you have something, you will not just throw it away, but if Krishna takes it away, you will not be upset. How you
Depends what he takes away. Yeah. I once got really upset. I had like 800 cards of shlokas, and it was on this, before computers, it was a system where you could actually pick shlokas for like 30 topics and pick them out. Somebody stole them. I was upset. I was really upset. Let's use some practical examples. Okay. You join the Hare Krishna movement, and like many devotees who join, they want to give their lives and they want to preach. And many devotees who join think, this is what I want to do. I love this, I want to give this, I'm very happy living simply, and so on and so forth. So you do that, you join when you're 18, 19, 20. Right? Now you're like 28, 29, your mentality's a little different. It's like, I'm living in an ashram with a bunch of 19-year-olds, and they're really dirty, rambunctious, etc., and it's kind of like, I need my own room. So then you start thinking, well, if I take sannyas, then I'll get my own room. So, so you're thinking about that, maybe that's what I should do. And then, like, a day after you think about sannyas, Bhaktin Susan moves in the temple. And Bhaktin Susan used to be a Hollywood actress. And now Bhaktin Susan is attracting your attention. And so you start to think, am I ready for sannyas? And then you think, well, if Susan will marry me, I won't take sannyas. And you think that's funny, and a lot of men have done that. Well, if she doesn't say yes, then I'll take sannyas. So, you're thinking, you're talking, and then you realize, actually, I'm not ready for sannyas. And you were raised in a very, very wealthy family. You had very nice things. You went to private schools, driven in nice cars. You had it all, right? And those things are starting to, like, surface a little bit. And after 10 years as a brahmachari, you realize that, I lived a pretty good life before as a devotee, and I don't know if I could just, live in a one-room studio after I get married, sleep on the floor. So you're finally coming to grips after some time with where you're at, and your tendencies. I always wanted to do such and such. I became a devotee when I was 19. I dropped out of college, but I was majoring in such and such, whatever it was, filmmaking, psychology, art, music, that's who you are. So it all starts to surface, and then you're thinking, okay, wife, house, movie making, nice car, nice clothes, how am I going to deal with all this? Then you start to think, okay, what's the point? Where's the threshold before it's going to be a problem, and where can I use it? And so you consider everything and you make decisions around that. Now, the interesting thing that I've noticed is that if let's say you were raised, in the homes you were raised were 10,000 square feet. I think it's square feet. 10,000 square feet is like, what's it like? 3,000 square meters, big house, like 20 rooms, that's like normal for you. So if you go into a house, like 20-room house, you walk in, for you that's just like normal. It's like no big deal. Like, I was raised in a house like this. This for me is zero. But if you were raised in a hut, then you go into a hut, and the hut for you is zero. And a one-bedroom apartment is like 5. So your 5 and his 5. Your 5 is like, 100 acres, castle. That's your 5. But in terms of your experience and attachment, it's the same. You're not any more bewildered or attached to your castle than he is to his one-bedroom apartment. It's both a 5 for you. Does that make sense? Because I've seen this, and I can experience this. And people, might say something, well, that's really nice. You have a really nice such and such. I've always had a really nice such and such. It's just normal for me. So you think of all these things, and then you decide how I can be engaged in Krishna service in the best way according to my nature, my samskaras, in a way that I won't fall prey to my attachments. At the same time, I won't be frustrated by not fulfilling them. And it'll be different for each person. And then you go ahead, and the proof that you've done it right is you're making advancement. Right? What was your question? I forgot the question I was answering.
I was saying that, as he was explaining, it seemed to me that you start putting things in terms of I and mine.
Yeah, I and
The
mine.
question was,
Yeah.
I have something,
Yeah.
I can use it in Krishna service, I don't throw it away.
Okay, let me tell you a story. When I was young, I think I got my first guitar when I was like 12 or 13, and I had a tape recorder, and I liked to play and write songs. And in those days, no 13-year-old was going to have access to multi-track recording, because that was basically the only people who had access to it are the ones who got signed by recording studios. So, I joined when I'm 19. Those samskars were still there, music, recording, like that. But when I was 19, it's 1969, there you had at least a couple $1,000 just to buy a 4-track reel-to-reel or something. They didn't have anything cheap. So gradually over time, that kind of equipment became more available, cheaper in technology. And that desire was still there in me. And so over the years I collect, I had a little extra money, I bought this, I bought that, this microphone, this preamplifier, this acoustic tiling, these effects, this recorder, just... And then finally, one day, there it was, 10 years of collecting. I had, a good space, 15 feet long, 12 foot wide, acoustic tiles, good microphones, everything. There it was. And I said to myself, you could spend 24 hours a day in the studio and never see the light of day, and not even care. And just make music the rest of your life. And eternally be in Maya. I know that was possible. Just make music, just forever. So at that point, I said, okay, this is dangerous. Because I had collected a lot. I had 4 synthesizers. I was 5 mics. And, I had good stuff. Good enough. And I made a promise to myself, I will only use this in Krishna service. If it doesn't have some practical use in Krishna service, all the buttons are off. I won't turn any equipment on. So we do music for plays, or I do CD chanting, or something like that. But other than that, I wouldn't just sit around and make music, because that's what I used to do, and I knew I could do that all day. And write songs, just for the sake of writing them. So that's an example of how. So that I would say, therefore, I wasn't identifying with I and mine, because I'm saying, Krishna, it's your studio, and I'm your servant, and therefore I will only use it for you. So that's how that didn't become a material, even though it is a material attachment, it didn't become one. I was here in Mayapur. That studio sat there for 6 years, collecting dust. I was okay, no problem. Because I didn't allow myself to get that attention. And I just went back to America this year and revved it up and got a new interface and this and that and new software. So it's still there, but now I'm here. So something like that. There has to be some level of detachment. Then you can say you're not identifying I and mine. This is Krishna's studio. It's not mine. Does that make sense? So that's that. I can say, honest, personally, I could say that safeguarded me. Because I never used it for any other purpose. If I couldn't use it for some purpose, in service, I didn't use it. I mean, fourth synthesizer, you know how many sounds that is? Each synth has 1,000, 1,200, 2,000 sounds. So you know how long it takes to find one sound when you have that many? Okay, I'm going to make a confession. Ladies and gentlemen, I did an introduction to a song. It was 3 minutes, just music. And I would say it took me 6 hours just to pick the sounds for that. So after I did that, I was just like, this is such a waste of time. How many spots of Bhagavatam I could have read? Just going through the sounds, and then you get the right sound, but it doesn't match with this other sound on the other track. And you got to remember where the sound you wanted was. So there's that also. You have to monitor it. It's for Krishna, but 6 hours. Pick out 6 sounds. Is that make Prabhupada happy? You know how Prabhupada recorded? He'd just go bring in the recorder and he'd start singing. An hour later, there was an album. Yeah, it took 10 years to do my last album, off and on. So, yeah, I think I took 3 months on one song. A little too much, I think. Especially when you listen to it. 3 months? It's not that good. Oh, here's a funny story. There was a devotee who's an actor, and he was in the Vaikuntha Players, which is the drama troupe that Prabhupada had sponsored. And so he was an actor before he was a devotee, and then he got to act. And Prabhupada saw these dramas. What more could you ask for if you're an actor? Perform for Prabhupada. And he lived in Dallas, and I spent some time in Dallas. And this drama troupe had disbanded some years after Prabhupada left, and he wasn't acting. He was, it's like you get devotees, let's put a band together, but he goes here, he goes there. It's hard to keep together. So it's hard to keep the drama troupe together, or even if they were together, they didn't always have time. So my wife and I were walking in a park one evening, and they had an amphitheater, and they were performing King Lear or something like that. And then we hear somebody playing King Lear, and we go, oh my God, that's Prajapati Prabhu. He's playing Shakespeare, King Lear or something. And it was just confirmation, if that's your nature, you're going to do it. If you can't do it for Krishna, you'll end up doing it anyway. So better do it for Krishna, right? That's the idea. So, when you recognize these things and you realize, if I don't do this album, Hare Krishna, I'm going to do an album saying, baby, baby, where'd you go? I'm missing you. So I better do Hare Krishna, because you're going to do, that's your nature. You can't not do it, right? Or if you're a writer, you're always writing. You can't not write. You'll always write. So if you recognize that about yourself, you don't feel bad. You just realize this is what Krishna made this body do, so I should use it in the service, because I just do it. I don't have to think about it. I'm just walking down the street. Oh, I got an idea for a song. I'm not even thinking of writing a song. It just comes to me. It's my nature. I have to do something, right? Like this song we did yesterday, the Shashastakam. Was it yesterday or the day before? I just heard devotees reciting in the temple. Oh my Lord. I'm like, no, this doesn't work. This is like nursery school, we're just reciting. I could see nobody was getting it, and I thought, we have to put music to this. And I was going somewhere. It's about an hour drive. And I had a little, I had my phone, so I just had some idea in my head and started singing it. And that evening, I went to someone's house. They had a guitar. I go, give me the guitar. And like 5 minutes later, I had the song done. And I was making up the words spontaneously. So it's not that I was trying to write a song. It's just what I do. So when you recognize that, you better do something in Krishna service for it, because you're going to do it anyway. And so you don't lament, oh, I'm so bad, like this and that. No, that's a gift Krishna's given you, so you use it. If you can use it, use it. If you have a gift and you don't use, it's like being given money and not spending it for Krishna. See it that way. It's energy. Is that okay? Now everyone's going to go get a recording studio tonight. Get a guitar. Okay, well, I'll go to Calcutta to the music store tomorrow. There's a devotee, he's from Bengal, he lives in Sydney, and he's going to move here, and he's got amazing recording equipment. He's an engineer, he's got a degree in recording, and he's going to move here and set up a studio. So we don't have to buy anything. Yeah, a year or two maybe. He works and he's single. You know what that means? He can afford to buy good equipment. Once you get married, can't buy any more equipment. You just start buying earrings and so on.
How can you use earrings and saris and Krishna?
Oh yeah, okay, that's a good question. Because every man knows, and if he doesn't know, he'll learn sooner or later. Every married man knows. If his wife isn't happy, he won't be happy. And if his wife is upset, he'll be upset. And so we have to create a platform in spiritual life where we can be peaceful. So if your wife is not happy with you, I mean, you know, some men will say she'll never be happy. But, you know, considering she will be happy if you treat her well, then when you give her the earrings and the saris and like that, it creates the bond. Home life is nice, it's loving, peaceful, and then you're peaceful, and then you do your service. So that's engaging in a Christian service. That makes sense? You have that experience?
I mean, I'm just saying, how can the women think of it? Like, how would they view it?
Oh, how the women think of it. I have to ask the women. I don't think they think. My daughter was decorating herself when she was 3 years old, and so that really enlightened me about that it's the woman's nature to decorate themselves. I don't think my daughter was thinking about it. Why am I putting on nice clothes? Nice clothes, nice earrings. 3 years old, you know. Take her a half hour to get ready. And she's 3 years old. You know, the men think, oh, they're just dressing up to attract us. No, they're dressing up because that's their nature, to look good. You want to go in the temple, you want to look good for Krishna. Right? You know, it's like self-respect. You want to look nice. But that's more ingrained in the female than the male. I mean, some men are like that. They like to dress well, but not all men. Right? But definitely for meeting the public, you have to dress well and look well. So and you would engage that. You know, and you know, devotees will say, look, if we all look like poor beggars, why would anyone want to come to the temple? They'll think, I want to end up like you. Yeah, that may be attractive to some people, to renunciates, but not everybody. Yeah? I had a Casio watch. It cost me $5, or equivalent in rupees, right? And we somehow managed that we were going to do a presentation in Mexico to the board of Volvo because they were thinking of hiring our company to help them. And so this person gave me this watch. It says, what does it say? Something, I can't read it, but it's Swiss. Anyway, it's not an imitation, it's a real thing. And he said, you can't go in front of these people with a Casio watch, because they'll think you're a loser. So he gave me this watch. So I wear this watch now, so no one will think I'm a loser. So it's a reality, right? Okay, so you might think, why don't you just have a Casio? This is like, you know, flamboyant. So I'm using it in Krishna service. I actually like Casios better, because they have little beeps to wake you up, and this doesn't. So if that's your mood, then you're okay. Yeah? Is that all right? Is that okay? Did I defend you well enough, or you need to defend yourself more? Want to know what Bhaktivedanta Swami said? I've also said it. He said, the women are not actually dressing up to attract the men, they're dressing up to attract the women. Because, not to attract them, but, you know, it's like, if every man here were wearing a really pucka silk dhoti, silk kurta, you know, and you walked in and you're wholly, you know, cotton dhoti, you know, you'd feel out of place. You'd want to dress. You know, so women dress nicely by nature, so, you know, if you don't, you won't fit in. Is that true? When you're older, it'll be true. Some women don't care, but most do. Well, let's take a vote, ladies. Raise your hand if you think that's true. Okay, close your eyes. Raise your hand if it's true. That you dress to, you know. You're concerned about how other women see you dress. I mean, is it the women or the guys who say, I like those earrings? It's the women, right? I was just talking to Sri Radha Govinda, and she's an astrologer, and she said, due to the astrology of some men, they never notice anything that their wife wears. It's not their nature. They don't see those things. So if the wife's decorating herself and the man doesn't notice, who's she decorating herself for? For her girlfriends, at least they'll notice. What do you think of that? Interesting. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
But isn't that intention to provoke envy to others?
If you have that nature, it might provoke it in you, but I don't think necessarily that's the motive.
But it's not healthy.
What?
Because that is not healthy, right?
Okay, I can only speak from experience. My wife has a lot of nice clothes. And she likes nice things. And that's how she was raised. And I don't think she buys nice clothes to make other women envious. I think she buys them because she feels, I don't know, that's just who she is. You know? You ever see these big mafia guys when they're getting arrested on their way to jail, and they're like $2,000 suits, and then they look good. You know, that's their profile. You know, they're not doing it to make other men envious. It's just who they are. You know, they have to, isn't it? Yeah, that's just how they dress. So I think that's their nature, just to look good. You know, I mean, obviously, some people may do it to make others envious, make them feel bad, but generally, devotees wouldn't do it.
So let me put it in another way. Not just about clothes, like, I don't know, maybe do kirtan. You want to do nice kirtan,
Yeah.
but because you want to do it nice for Krishna,
Yeah.
but maybe people will get envious because of that.
Yeah, that's always there. Of course. If you become successful, someone will always be envious. If you're more successful than them. That you can't avoid. That's just what happens here in this world. You're going to have to deal with it. You're just going to have to humbly deal with it. It's a reality. The more successful you become, the more envious some people will be. Yeah, if you're very beautiful, some women will be envious, isn't it? If you're very thin, the heavy ones won't like you. If you're fair, the dark ones may not like you. If you're dark, the fair ones may not like you. You know, it's like, it's the nature of the world. So what can you do? You just try to please Krishna. That's all. You sincerely try to please Krishna, everything's okay. Just whatever happens after that, happens. You just tolerate it. Look at Prabhupada. He had trouble, right? Bhaktisiddhanta had trouble from his own disciples. They turned against him. Some. If you can keep your head when all those around you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. You've heard that poem? Rudyard Kipling. If you can keep your head when all those around you are losing their heads, they're going crazy and angry, and they're blaming it on you, then you're a man, my son. And it's verse after verse. What qualifies you to be a man? If you can build your dreams and watch them in 1 minute be destroyed and not give up hope, then you're a man, my son. So he was just describing reality. What happens? You'll build everything up, and somehow or other it may all be destroyed in one day. And the next day you get up and you rebuild it. Then you're a man. That's just what we have to do. So our consciousness is, I'll do it to please Krishna. And that's what's important. If they become envious of you, don't be envious of them. If someone's envious of you, don't give it back to them. Stay humble. Okay. The devotee is in Krishna's heart, so if we offend the devotee, we offend Krishna's heart. It is said Krishna cannot tolerate an offense to his devotee. It is not a philosophical issue. It is an issue of hurting the Lord's heart. But if we serve and glorify Vaishnavas, it pleases Krishna's heart. I have seen something very interesting happening in the Hare Krishna movement. And you've probably all seen this. Some devotee starts to become critical and offensive, and it becomes quite consistent. Often we find after a few months that devotee leaves. That's like the precursor. And so you might think, well, we're all young devotees and he's offending us, so what's the problem? Why should that impede his devotional service? Because we're not very advanced. What I've seen in my life is it doesn't always matter how advanced the devotee is, although the more advanced, the more severe the reaction. But just the fact that Krishna is pleased when you serve the devotees and he's displeased when you offend them. And it doesn't matter. Okay, I serve you. Oh, but you've only been a devotee 10 years, so yeah, forget it. It's not powerful. No, you've been a devotee 1 day. Krishna's happy that I serve you. I've seen this over and over again. It's very interesting. Krishna is happy when devotees are served. Even you serve a new devotee, he's happy. And he's not happy when you offend devotees, even if it's a new devotee, a young devotee. And I've seen it, and the acharyas write about this. They describe this. Have you seen it? It's very interesting. You know, like you have different spiritual masters. So you think, well, if that spiritual master is more advanced, will it be more beneficial for the disciple? Maybe I should serve the more advanced, or maybe I should find what I think is the more advanced. Krishna is happy when you serve your guru. Wherever level he's at, he's happy when you serve your guru. It's not about him being this level or slightly higher or slightly lower. It's about you pleasing your spiritual master. That's the principle. And that makes Krishna happy, and then you get mercy. Right? Have you ever done something your spiritual master asked you to do that you didn't want to do? And after you did it, you felt really good? None of you have done that? Yes? No? Not yet? Yeah. So, you will feel the pleasure of pleasing your spiritual master. Or it could be the temple president, it could be any person who's in charge. You will feel the pleasure of pleasing that person because Krishna's pleased when you serve them. And if we offend them, then we're offending Krishna's heart, and then Krishna's not pleased. My document has disappeared. Oh, here we go. Okay. We are meant to adore Krishna, so if we offend him, it is contradictory to bhakti, right? So if I offend you, I've offended Krishna. And I'm meant to worship Krishna, and if I offend Krishna, what happens to my bhakti? When one serves a Vaishnava unknowingly, one still gets the good result. And if one unknowingly insults a Vaishnava, one suffers the bad result. A Vaishnava is especially favored by the Lord. Pleasing or displeasing him directly affects the pleasure and displeasure of the Supreme Lord. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his 8 stanzas to the spiritual master, is sung, Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada. By pleasing the spiritual master, who is a pure Vaishnava, one pleases Krishna. But if one displeases the spiritual master, one does not know where he is going. Okay. The Lord is overly protective of devotees. He cannot tolerate any offenses against them. They have bhakti and they can awaken it within us. Bhakti is the sole means to attract Krishna, who is a slave of devotion. Offense does not attract Krishna's favor, but causes his displeasure. If we displease him, we distance ourselves from him. So aparad is a result of displeasing Krishna, and then we're at a distance. And what happens if someone displeases you? You want to get close to them, or you want to go further away from them? We want to go further away, and that's what happens with us and Krishna. We offend the devotees. Krishna's displeased. Okay, now, in the Jaiva Dharma, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that when a devotee reaches the stage of bhava, and bhava means emotion for Krishna, it's a preliminary stage of love of God, it's when love is just starting to begin, kind of almost free from all material contamination, that love is awakening. He said, when the devotee achieves bhava, the emotion he has for Krishna, that love that he has for Krishna, when it extends itself to everyone else in this world, it turns into compassion. So it's like, you look to Krishna, there's love, you look to everyone else, it's compassion. It's the same emotion, but it manifests differently when it goes to Krishna or goes to living entities. So what does that mean? It means when there's love of God, there's compassion to everyone. Right? We've heard that before, right? But it's a little more clear explanation. But it also means the opposite. So, if there's envy towards God, there will be envy towards others. If there's love towards God, there will be compassion towards others. Right? You agree? Raise your hand if you disagree. Okay, we all agree. All right. So now let's analyze that, because that's a scary thought. I may be envious of you, and I may have good reason in my mind to be envious of you. And I think, I'm a devotee and I'm envious of you because of this reason or that reason. But according to the philosophy, I wouldn't be envious of you unless I was envious of Krishna. That's pretty heavy, isn't it? To acknowledge that, if I'm envious of you, it's an extension of my envy of Krishna. That's not easy to acknowledge, but that's the reality. So if you find yourself being envious, it's because someone has some quality that Krishna has in more degree than we have it, and we don't like that they have it. Isn't it? Okay. That's what envy is. And Prabhupada said, if you find yourself envious of someone, the remedy is to serve them. This counteracts envy, because you want to pull them down, and serving them will push them up. So help push them up. Isn't that interesting? The last thing you want to do is push somebody up who you're envious of, right? And that's why you need to do it. Because it purifies the envy. In other words, if you're experiencing an emotion which is antagonistic to bhakti, the way to cure it is to just counteract it by doing the exact opposite. So the opposite of envy would be to serve, right? That's the counteraction. Or you feel resentment. The opposite of resentment is appreciation and service. Have you heard that before? You should serve those who are envious. And Prabhupada explained something also, it's very interesting. He explained the psychology of envy, and he said, the psychology of envy is that the person you're envious of, you actually appreciate. Like, we were on a walk this morning. Yeah. We were on a walk this morning, and, you know, we went somewhere and someone was sweeping. And, you know, when you see a sweeper, someone sweeping the street or somebody collecting garbage, you're probably not envious of them. Because you really wouldn't want to do that. So they don't have something that you want. They don't have something you really appreciate. They don't have something that you respect and honor. That's why you're not envious of a street sweeper or a garbage collector or, you know, some construction worker in the middle of the winter in Russia. You wouldn't be envious of him if you work in an office or something. You're envious of the person who has what you want. And specifically, they have the nature or the qualities you would like to have, or the success you would like to have, or the facility, right? So Prabhupada said, if you can recognize that, then you'll see that actually you're really honoring and appreciating the person you're envious of, but you don't realize it. Isn't that interesting? So-and-so is up here and I'm down here and I want to be up here and I'm not and I'm envious. But I'm only envious because I appreciate what he's doing and I'm not doing it. And therefore Prabhupada said, serve them. Now, why is this also beneficial? Think about this. This is very interesting. Do you think if there's something you want, it's conducive to getting it, to criticize everyone who has it? Doesn't make sense, does it? Like, let's say you don't have money, and you want money, but you criticize all the people who have money. So what you've done is you've created a lot of negativity towards money because you don't like the people that have money. But you want to get money, but now everything about money is negative, and all the people who have it is negative. So it works against you because you've created a negative around something you want. So if you create a negative around a devotee who has the qualities you want, how will you develop those qualities? Because you've just created a negative. You've associated something negative with the quality you want. Does that make sense? I want to be humble and I don't like this devotee because he's so humble. Now I created a negative around humility. Right? So when Prabhupada's saying, serve them and recognize that you're actually honoring them, and then there's a positive association there. Oh, you're such a good videographer. I appreciate you so much. That inspires me to become good, become better. Right? Creates a positive association around you doing what I want to do. Is that okay? Yes.
Well,
But if somebody is causing a lot of disturbance in a Vaishnava society by always criticizing and speaking bad about others, and showing this behavior as narcissistic traits or psychopathic behavior, should we tolerate this or that?
Oh, should we tolerate him?
I mean, should we promote that or serving them and improving
Oh,
their
yeah. It will vary from situation to situation depending on who the person is and how difficult their problems are and how much they're trying to work on themselves and how much they recognize the problem. But I could say one thing as a general principle. Our Shastras say that if a devotee is being attacked, we should protect them. Right? We should never defend ourselves, but we should defend others. That's a principle of humility. It's okay to defend another person. So, taking that line of thinking, if some devotee is doing something that is damaging to other devotees, we want to protect the other devotees from that person. Simultaneously, Shastra says we should not listen to blasphemy. So if there's a person who's always blaspheming and subjecting our devotee community to blasphemy, we would do something to stop that. Yes?
Ravana's quote in his Chaitanya Bhagavat many times once when two devotees quarrel, you take side of one of them, you commit offense. So this and protecting devotee, how to properly see.
Because I was saying it within the context of a devotee's damaging other devotees. Because his behavior is damaging. So it's not a Siddhantic argument that this devotee he's unable to control himself and he's committing offenses and it's polluting the environment, and as a senior devotee or leader you want to protect the other devotees from that. That's different. Yeah, like we all have different views on how Krishna consciousness should be spread, or we might have some different views on philosophy, but we're not polluting anybody. So the injunction is, if somebody takes your side, somebody takes my side, then we're creating factions, and that's not Vaishnavism, that's not right. Then I don't like you because I'm on his side. And so then there's enmity towards you, and we want to avoid that. That's how we understand it, so we don't create enmity. But in a situation where a devotee is creating problems for others and it's affecting the sanctity of the ashram, then we have to do something, because we're instructed that hearing blasphemy is equally as harmful as speaking it. And so we don't want to subject other devotees to it. And see, the other thing with blasphemy, if you listen to it, it uproots your faith, because you're hearing something. If you hear blasphemy of leading devotees, you'll lose your faith. You'll end up losing your faith in ISKCON, the process, and so on and so forth. 50 years, and this is what they're doing. This process doesn't work. I'm going somewhere else. Something like that. The other thing I think we have to recognize is some people, by nature, for whatever reason, are drawn into this stuff. They like it. It kind of nourishes their existence to hear bad things about other people. And some of us are looking for excuses to leave ISKCON, and this is one of the best. If you hear criticism of leaders, it gives you a perfect excuse to leave.
But that most probably is already you have this tendency because you commit offenses.
You have the tendency, and yeah. But if we have people around, it feeds that tendency. Maybe otherwise you'd be okay. But have people around being highly critical, it feeds that tendency. And then, if we're leaders and we allow it, then we're allowing Naamapradha to infiltrate. And then everybody's chanting and committing offense to devotees. It doesn't work.
So what would you practically do?
What would I do? There's two kinds of devotees. The one you can talk to and the one you can't talk to. The one you can't talk to does nothing after you talk to them. And a lot of times those devotees are not, sometimes, are not actually mentally stable, and that's why you can't reason with them. So, as it said, sometimes you sacrifice one person to save a village. So sometimes you have to sacrifice a person. Say, you can't stay with us because they're creating too many problems. So you have your standards. I think the bigger problem is that we allowed him to move in the first place, not understanding that he has this nature, and then it disturbs everybody, and it's harder to get him out because now he's moved in and this is where he lives. He planned to stay here and we're asking him to leave. It's not fair to him. It's better we didn't ask him to move in.
Are you creating offense if he takes offense?
No, because that's directly in service to protecting the devotees. And even if it is an offense, Krishna will deal with it, because you did it in service. I mean, Prabhupada, one of the things that Prabhupada did, this is quite interesting. Prabhupada would sometimes describe mistakes his godbrothers made. And he was describing those mistakes to explain to us that we could also make those mistakes. So he said, they made this mistake and this is the ramification. So in describing the mistake, he was criticizing them. But he felt he had to do it for our benefits, otherwise we could easily make the same mistakes. And then in Prabhupada's last days, he apologized to his godbrothers for doing that. And he took a humble position. He said, I became proud. But actually, if you see what he was doing, he was just clarifying. He said, this is what happened. And this is why they were not successful or as successful as we were, because they made this mistake, so you don't make that same mistake. So he was using them as an example. So it was a criticism, but it was a criticism in Krishna's service, which was necessary to protect us. So it wasn't an offense.
I always was thinking that Prabhupada, he never had any envy towards anybody.
Yes.
And he never had ill motivations in criticizing.
Yes.
He always acted out of compassion, therefore he could not actually.
Yeah. And when he apologized to the godbrothers, they said, you didn't offend us. You couldn't. They said the same thing. You couldn't offend us. Because as we discussed, offense is a mentality where there's hatred and there's envy. So I think that's the key of this first offense: envy and hatred towards another Vaishnava. It's really major. It's fault finding. Next stage goes up as blasphemy, and that's where it really gets dangerous. But fault finding is dangerous, but not as dangerous. And fault finding generally, it's just the wrong mentality because it's opposed to humility. We're trying to cultivate humility. So if we're always fault finding, Trinadapi Suniche, that's the mood we have to chant in. It's not going to be there. It's going to impede coming to the pure level of chanting. So we want to avoid it. And in everything I've read from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta about fault finding, it's housed in that context, that it's antithetical to humility. And it takes away the focus from your own anarthas and it puts it on others, so you can't improve yourself. So it's just the wrong mentality. Amanina manadena, offering all respects to others, not wanting any respect for myself. That's the perfect state of humility. In that state, then our chanting will become free from false ego, very pure. Yes?
When we see this kind of tendency, like becoming in some devotee to get critical, and is there a way to help them? Because I had an experience in ashram with one girl who was very sincere devotee, very, very sincere devotee, but she, I don't know, maybe she just had some, she was hurt or something like that, and she started like criticizing, and then you know, sometimes these devotees, they think that they see the truth, you know, like some problems in ISKCON or whatever, and they feel this urge to speak it out, and they feel like, you know, that's the right thing to do. But like when we see this from the side, it's not actually the right thing to do. So
How to deal with
a way
it?
to help them. Because like this devotee that, you know, I'm having in mind, like she's not even chanting anymore, and she's still holding, you know, like she's hurt. And she's saying that I don't want to come back to the devotees because they hurt me, but you know.
If you go maybe to Dandavats or maybe my website, mahatmadas.com, I had contemplated this question probably for 10 years, and at one point I thought, let me try to articulate my analysis of why devotees fault find. Because generally, you would think it's just a spiritual weakness. That was the general idea. If you're not very Krishna conscious, you'll be more prone to fault find, and if you're more Krishna conscious, you'll be less prone to fault find because you're becoming more humble and appreciative, which in a general sense, of course, is true. But then, when I was examining all the possible reasons people could find fault, there were many other reasons which could even affect people who are a little more advanced. And if those problems were not there in devotees less advanced, they would be inclined to be less critical, even though less advanced. So what you're presenting falls into that category. More of the material side, the psychological side. And it sounds like, at least from my experience, when there is a person who has a very difficult time getting along with others and feeling slighted and people don't appreciate me and they're not kind, it sounds like a person who's extremely sensitive, who's probably had a lot of problems with people not treating him or her well before becoming devotees. And what for a normal person wouldn't be a problem becomes a problem for them. So that's where I would start. If you really feel there's really no reason and they're exaggerating it, it's got a whole history. And I deal with it all the time. And if the problem is serious, some people cannot get over it unless they get professional help. And unfortunately, many of them don't want professional help because they don't think anything's wrong with them. Even though they have problems with everybody. They'll just go from one place to another and they'll have the same problem. Again, those are probably the kind of people we don't want in the ashram. They could take up a lot of time and energy, and it's hard to resolve the issue because the issues are deeper, so you can't really resolve them just externally. Everyone apologizes, but 3 days later they're going to get upset because that's their nature. They have needs that aren't being met, that are not going to be met in the ashram. So, I mean, every case is individual, but that's an experience I have. Not a spiritual problem per se, it's a material problem. I'm just dealing with that today, actually. I deal with it all the time. A devotee not being able to work with another devotee, getting reactive over something that I don't think was necessary to react about, but feeling hurt or disrespected. So some of us have a nature where we need to be respected. It's in our astrology. You can go right there and go, yeah, there it is. They need to be respected, and if they're not, they get hurt. Then when they get hurt, they start faulting the people who hurt them. But that same behavior wouldn't have hurt you or her, only them, because that's their nature. A little joke, when you're dealing with those people where you just can't resolve, there's a little mantra. Thank God I'm not married to her. Because you know if you were, this is what you'd be dealing with every day. And the meaning of that is that people who are going to get married need to be healthy emotionally. And people who are going to live in temples in close proximity need to be healthy emotionally. otherwise. They create problems for themselves and others. Ashrams are not meant for everybody. Not everybody can, live in those close quarters and deal with authorities and submit and be humble and honest and introspective. Yes?
Interesting that Dhruva Maharaj was driven to his spiritual life by such situation.
He had a good mother, though. And he listened to her. Well,
he didn't even listen to Narada Muni when he started giving him more hermeneutical advice.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting situation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Happy ending.
And quick.
Yeah.
Months done.
Yeah. But our situation is different in the sense that, I think it goes back to this other point. If we have, let's say this is a temple here. We're all brahmacharis, brahmacharinis. And I'm the president, and somebody wants to join. I have to be thinking, will you fit in the ashram? Well, will you be a good fit? Otherwise, you'll disturb people. So, I'd like you to live, but I can just see by talking to you that your nature won't work here. And so my first job is to protect the devotees we already have. So I may not allow that person to live in the temple. And if you do, it may create problems, and it may take a lot of your time to deal with it. And it's not fair to that person also to ask them to leave after a few weeks. So I don't think it's not being compassionate. It's being compassionate on the devotees you have. Right?
And also this person, because he will create less problem for himself.
Yeah. And he'll make less offenses.
Yeah.
The problem is if any of us have some issue that's unresolved, it can cause us to criticize devotees unnecessarily, and that's not good for our spiritual life. So the material problem then generates a spiritual problem. So ideally, in the perfect ISKCON, we would have counselors, therapists, and like that to be able to help these devotees understand why they have what the problem is, why they have it, where it came from, and how to resolve it. And then that would prevent them from being critical and upset and angry and having to leave. There's so many people who leave angry. They don't just leave, oh, I'm too weak, I can't do this. No. Temple president, I hate him. ISKCON this, So, Prabhupada said 50% is ISKCON's fault. But the point is, 50% that's not, it would help if they saw that it's their nature and it's the chemistry mix. And if they understood more about themselves, then maybe they could work within that environment better. Unfortunately, we don't have so many trained people to help devotees, but it's needed. So that's unfortunate when you're committing offenses, and it's not a spiritual weakness; it's a material problem that you haven't dealt with, or you don't know you haven't dealt with it. So, and if you're on the other end counseling, then you have to be aware if it is a material problem, because if you throw philosophy at a material problem, it doesn't work. I like philosophy, and if I throw philosophy at the wrong person, they spit back. You're so insensitive. You don't care about me. And you gave the perfect philosophical answer. But that's not the level where the problem resides. It resides at a different level.
So basically the story of Dhruva Maharaj. Same. He had
a material problem, yeah. He had revenge in his heart. Yeah. And philosophy isn't going to work. Anyway, we have to be aware of that if we're counseling people.
He was frank enough to admit it. Said,
yeah, he's a Kshatriya, so yeah, he wouldn't admit it. Yes?
How to keep the level of compassion still towards those people.
Mm-hmm.
a little bit like I was in the ashram as well, and some point in charge of them, and I met this girl, and she was very favorable, but and also was someone from overseas, so you ended up meeting with a problem that her visa was about to run out. So we helped her moving into the ashram, but it was very disturbing later on. We came to know that there was a lot of issues there. But then you want to say that person, because it's going to be in trouble if she goes out there.
Yeah.
It's going to take back into bad habits again. But at the same time, it's affecting a bit of the community there. So how to be still compassionate and
to that person. Yeah. That's a tough. She's asking. You bring someone in the ashram and you see that actually they shouldn't stay there because they're creating problems, but if you ask them to leave, it's going to really be bad for them. How to be compassionate, how to deal with it compassionately. Of course, it's going to vary from situation to situation. I think, like we're discussing, the most compassionate thing would have not be to allow her to move in the first place. Because now you get all her expectations up. There's another phenomenon that I've seen. This is quite interesting. This is the story of the bald-headed man with the toothpick. So in Los Angeles Temple, which I spent a lot of time at, since first time I went there was 1969, and the last time I went there was 2017. So, and I live about a mile, I grew up about a mile from the temple, and I spent many years in Los Angeles Temple. And at some point, I think the late 70s, there was a man, I don't know who he is, nobody talked to him. He was like 10, maybe 20 years older than all of us. And every evening at Arti, he'd take a chair, I guess he brought his own chair, he'd sit in the very back of the temple, had a toothpick in his mouth, bald head, and he would just sit and come to Arti. Like in mysterious, kind of a mysterious thing. He didn't talk to anybody, nobody talked to him. Just, the bald guy with the toothpick who was older than us. So, 1970s, I'm in LA, I go around, I come back, 50% new faces, 50% gone. The bald-headed guy with the toothpick, still there. 10 years later, 80% new faces, only 20% left. The bald-headed guy with the toothpick, still there. 10 years later, I come back, there's a whole changing of the guard, so many devotees gone, and this guy's still there. So there's also something to be said about that, allowing people in an ashram environment may not be the best thing, even though, like you say, if she goes out, maybe she won't make it, but 10 years from now she might be better off fighting and struggling and finding her own and sorting out her problems on her own and becoming stable. So I've seen many people who go slow, 10, 20 years later, they end up higher than the people who lived in the ashram, crashed, and then went out, tried to get a material life, and they couldn't do both well, and they gave up their Krishna consciousness. So that's another way of looking at it. And, if in your temple you have facility to educate people who live outside and help people and counsel, then it can work. So think of it that way. Now, what's best for her? Probably to be outside, right? In the right environment, if you can create the right environment. But she probably shouldn't live with anybody. Right? But let me just explain what's happening in the world today. As you probably know, before, I don't know when it was, middle 50s or 60s, divorce was illegal. It was very difficult to get divorced. Right? So nobody got divorced. So people just stayed together. They didn't necessarily like one another, get along. But they stayed together. And that, in most cases, it kept more stability for the kids growing up. At least they had a mother and a father. Right? And after the divorce laws were enacted, then the number of divorces started increasing, and now it's like 50 or 60%. I can't believe it's only 50 or 60. I think it's higher. Well, a lot of people don't marry and they separate, so you don't have those records. But let's say we'll just go with 50. If it's 50%, that means 50% of the people joining ISKCON are coming from families where the parents are divorced, which makes it harder for them than if they came from a stable family, which means they might have some issues that people who had two parents don't have. There's a higher likelihood. So that's what we're dealing with now. We're dealing with more instability amongst youth. And my generation was the first generation of hippies. Those hippies had kids, and those hippies were, feeding their kid marijuana brownies and things like that. So a lot of those kids were growing up with hippie parents, and they're like, they got hippie Shakti in their genes. I've seen that. We used to distribute books at Grateful Dead concerts. It's like those were all the ones who missed. They were 40 years too late, and they wanted to be hippies also. Probably their parents were hippies, and they just didn't. So they're much more unstable. Their parents were very unstable as hippies. So that's what's going on now. So it's more difficult for us now in having people live in ashrams. They're coming with more problems. Then the next problem you're getting is that as Kali Yuga is getting worse, parenting skills are getting worse. So people are being raised by parents who aren't necessarily good parents, or who didn't even maybe want their kids. And that's hard for the kids also. So we're getting more and more people coming to our movement with that, in that situation. And we don't have a lot of professionals to deal with them, and that's unfortunate, because we need it. Don't we? Because we're trying to deal with it, and we're throwing Bhagavad Gita shlokas at them, and they're spitting back at us, because that doesn't work. That's not what they need. Isn't it? They're getting offended by those shlokas. Have you seen that? Because it's not relating to the problem. So, yes.
It's interesting that, one of the most revered temples, Pune, Tirupati, they so selective, they're mega selective about the people. They observe people, they need to have high education and work for a couple of years. So they make sure that people are super stable, super reliable, committed. Then they allow it to become brahmacharis. And I think that's why it creates such a powerful
It's protection for all the brahmacharis that are there. You want to hear something interesting? I was starting or hoping to do some work within the corporate sector. So I wanted to read some books about what goes on in corporations, and I read a book about corporate culture and different, especially companies run by younger people who are a little more spiritual. They have this culture where when they're thinking of hiring somebody, the leaders in the company don't make the decisions, the employees make it. And the way they make the decision is, if they think someone might fit within their company, then for a week they're given to work with different groups and different teams in the company. So one day with this team, one day, and then after the week, the teams decide if that person is on the right frequency, has the same culture and inspiration and beliefs that we do. And if they don't, even if they're qualified, they'll say, I don't think they should work here. So the corporate sector is now realizing something they didn't used to understand. They used to hire by qualification. And now they're hiring more by nature. Does this person's nature fit within our culture? Do they believe in what we believe? So let's say you have a brahmachari ashram, and it's very open. You're all really open. You're all really honest. You all really help one another. You don't want to bring people in who are like a little deceptive and who want to control, and it doesn't work. So they may be qualified, but generally, what we used to do in early days of ISKCON, those kinds of people we would recommend to go to temples that have like 300-400 devotees, because it wouldn't upset the balance so much. But if there's just 6 devotees, they upset the balance. So places like New Vrindavan, that was in America, had like 600 devotees and 3,000 acres, and they could absorb people that didn't fit into smaller temples. Yeah, of course they can. They got too many of them. Well, I think it was a top-down problem, but it was true that a lot of those people could fit in there because they just had a place, and so it's interesting. So if your ashrams are sacred, and so you want to be careful who you allow in there. I think. Yes.
What was the situation when Prabhupada said that it's 50% our fault?
What did he mean by that? Or
Yeah, maybe he said.
well, I think, as the Prabhupada said, if somebody leaves, 50% is their fault, 50% is our fault. That meant we were giving them 50% of their reasons to leave were coming from us. Maybe they weren't properly engaged, we weren't sensitive to them, maybe they were mistreated in some way. I think Prabhupada recognized that sometimes our leadership wasn't so sensitive to people's needs, and we weren't so sensitive to relationships. So we were doing things that were unsettling to them, or they weren't happy with how things were going. So I think you could think of any number of reasons why people would leave that it was our fault. But I think Prabhupada's point was he wanted us to accept some responsibility. Otherwise, if we didn't, it would keep happening, and we would just think it's their fault, not our fault. If you were a leader, you could say it's 100% my fault if anybody leaves. You could take that responsibility if you wanted. That would help you a lot.
There was a time when Prabhupada said that we shouldn't take more people, we should boil the milk.
When Prabhupada, when problems hit a certain level, and there seemed to be a lack of training, a lack of understanding of philosophy, a lack of proper achar, proper behavior, etc., then Prabhupada said, don't bring any more people in. It's like the boat's going to sink. It's got a little hole in it. We can't hold any more people. Let's fix the hole. Let's make sure we save these people. Go fix the hole now. So that was his idea. Let's get our people firmly fixed in Krishna consciousness. I mean, he saw devotees were falling down. They weren't all chanting their rounds. They weren't all attending morning programs. So it's like, why bring more people in with such a bad example? Let's make sure what we have. It's like, maintain what you have before you're buying something new. So that was his idea. And I think it's more true today than it was then. He was concerned that we're not chanting our rounds, we don't know the books, we're not following the principles, and the movement's expanding. More people are coming. So his point was, why more if the ones here aren't up to the standard? And Prabhupada was quite strict about certain things, so liberal about others, but about sadhana he was very strict. Because he knew that if we didn't have some good standard of sadhana, then we really had no standard in our temples. And everything would get watered down, and people would just stay there for a place to live. Because he saw that in Gaudiya Math. And he talked about it. He said it was kind of become a place for people to live, get some meals. Yeah. So he didn't want to create that. So he was concerned. Yes, you had a...
There's a Matashi there.
Yes. Haribo.
So, Prabhu, it seems like it's a catch-22 because we have all these people who don't get along. We want to protect ISKCON, we want to protect other devotees, but like you said, it's such a common phenomenon and it's escalating.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, part of my question is how to prevent it from escalating. Like for us, how we treat people when we get kids, but also like, it seems unjust to these people who are estranged, and we're all victims of victims.
Yeah. I have an idea. I need your help. I just need money and I can do it. So, call up your rich Uncle Harry. He said, you want to give a donation to a good cause. What I feel, I've been a devotee. I moved in the temple in January of 1970, so that's 48 years. So I've seen a lot. And I've come to the conclusion, from my perspective, what's needed is that we have workshops that would address these kinds of issues. Because the problems we're talking about, there are not a million of them. There's basically like 3. And people either have one. People who have these problems. We all have the problem, but when it gets past a certain threshold, then we have relationship issues. And so it's the problem of blame. It's the problem of self-esteem. It's the problem of lack of willpower, codependency. These things. So in my mind, the solution is to have trainings where we can look at these problems and heal them, so that when we come into the association of devotees, then when there's a problem, we'll recognize our own issues as the cause, and we'll know how to deal with them. Or we've already dealt with them, and they won't be the cause. But just throwing someone in to the association who has these issues, it's not good for them, and it's not good for the other people who don't have the issues. That's my experience. It always is a problem. And if someone has certain issues, then I know they're going to have problems in that Sangha if they don't deal with it. And they're going to start blaming and complaining. And they're going to blame and complain themselves out of ISKCON. And if they blame and complain themselves out of ISKCON, often what they do is they stop doing devotional service. And if they stop doing devotional service, then they're not strong enough on their own to resist the temptations of this world. So I was actually last week talking to a devotee about this very workshop. It's going to take 5 days, or at least 5 to 7 days, about 10 hours a day. And we're going to go for it. That's what we need. And this kind of discussion is what the workshop would be about, and how to deal with it. And all of you would look at your own weaknesses and start to deal with it. Because if you bring people into association of devotees who have a tendency to blame, they're going to be failures. And relationships are going to be failures of Krishna consciousness. They're just going to blame something. Well, the reason, like we said yesterday, the reason I don't chant good rounds is this, blank, blank, blank. And so we have to teach people how to be strong enough to understand what an excuse is and be able to deal with it, so that you can be able to achieve what you intend to achieve by becoming a devotee. Because a lot of us don't achieve what we intend to achieve because we don't know how to deal with problems, and we buy into our excuses and we make our excuses real. Some of us see the whole world through how we feel. It's what I feel is the absolute truth. And if I don't feel good, and you tell me something that doesn't make me feel good, even though it's 100% true, I will deny it. I'll reject it. And you have to be able to recognize that. Otherwise, you can't get good instruction, because that instruction didn't feel good, so I reject it. And I say that's the wrong instruction, when the instruction's perfect, and you don't realize. So if you understand that's happening, then you can start dealing with it, right? And we're all different, so we all have our own nature. And we need to know our weaknesses. That's my personal feeling. And if you want to do that workshop next year, we're going to have to go somewhere, and like for a week, and just deal with it. And not everybody's going to want to do that, because when you have to deal with your issues, it's not fun. It's fun after the 7 days are over, but not necessarily fun during it. But if you don't deal with it, it's going to be a problem for you. It's going to come up. And people are going to offend you when they're not offending you, because you have needs that they're not meeting, and you had no agreement with them to meet those needs, but you expected them to meet those needs because you yourself lack those needs, and you're going to start blaming people for not fulfilling your needs who have no reason to fulfill your needs, because those are personal needs that you should fulfill. And if you don't understand that, you're going to go from one situation to another, from one relationship to another, and you're just going to keep blaming and blaming. And if we don't help devotees heal those situations, they're going to have problems, and they're not going to be able to stay. You know how many people leave ISKCON? More than join. And that's part of the reason, because we haven't helped them, see these things. So that's my solution. I don't know how practical it is, because I'm only one person. But I think that's necessary.
It seems like it's super vital, actually.
It is.
Because Prabhupada said, you'll show me how much you love me by how well you get along with others.
Yeah.
And if you look at like technology and social media, it can be a good tool, but it also separates us and it makes us struggle to connect to ourselves and to others.
Okay, let me tell you a story. This is so cool. You know these japa workshop retreats that we all have? Well, they came to America about 10 years ago, so it never happened in America. I mean, Satchidananda Swami did a few here and there. And so what happened at this japa retreat was unique for ISKCON. It was totally different than the culture and the paradigm of anything in ISKCON. Because once you were in the japa retreat, there was no higher, lower. There was just sadhakas trying to connect with the holy name. So the sannyasis, the GBCs, the Prabhupada disciples, the new bhaktas, we were all on the same level. We were all just sharing our challenges, sharing our troubles, and it was the most bonding, amazing environment. And all the devotees who went there said, I've never been in an ISKCON like this, where the playing field was level. And we could just open up, and the senior devotees were opening up about their problems in japa. And it was, that environment, everybody just grew so much in that environment. I felt it was just like, nobody wanted to leave. Like when it was time to leave, everybody just sat there and said, I don't want to go. This is the kind of environment we live. So, yeah.
Then it sounds like there's too much separation between senior devotees and newer devotees and Prabhus and Matajis and sannyasis. Like, do you think that even though this is necessary to an extent in terms of etiquette and psychology, that it can also be a deterrent?
It depends on if it's not done well, it could be. Yeah. We were just at Rajpur today, and we were talking about Jayananda, and Jayananda's samadhi is there because Jayananda was the devotee who started the first 3 Rath Yatras in America, so they put his samadhi there. And I was telling the devotees that I'd never met a person as humble as Jayananda. So, if we progress and as leaders we become more humble, then you won't have that problem. But if we're not trained well, or we put the wrong people in leadership positions and then they misuse it, then you have that problem. And that tendency is always there. That's why creating an organization is so difficult, because if you study psychology, psychology will tell you as soon as someone gets in a leadership position, they misuse it. They've done many, many experiments about this, and the results are always the same. Give someone a little power, and they'll start lording it over people. So we have this challenge that Prabhupada gave us at a very early age: power. You're a temple president. I was 8 months, 20 years old, temple president. That's a huge challenge. So that's the problem, that we have to take those positions. But to be able to do it and do it right is not going to be easy. And that would answer your question. That's, somebody didn't do it right and then someone left. He was immature or inexperienced. So, I think the best way for us to look at these issues is not look at it in terms of what is happening now in ISKCON as much as when I become a leader, what will I do? Because if we just want to look at it in terms of others, we may not relate it to ourselves. And if you're still here 40 years from now, you'll be a leader, whether you like it or not. Because just the fact, 40 years from now, you're going to be my age or older, and there's going to be 20-year-olds coming to the movement. You're practically be their grandmother. They're going to look up to you. Whether you're Krishna conscious or not, they're going to look up to you. And so you want to think about how you're going to deal with them. And what kind of leader you're going to be, because unofficially, if you stay long enough in the movement, you'll all be leaders. It's just a reality. What to speak, God forbid, they ask you to be their guru. Yeah, it's going to happen. Now what are you going to do? or they ask you because you have skills to be on the strategic planning committee of the GBC, and now you're one of those that you're looking at now. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? That's how we should be thinking. How am I going to do it when I'm there? Of course, we're thinking we're never going to be there, but if you stick around long enough, you will be. It's just by default. If you're serious enough to stick around, you'll be seen as a qualified candidate for something, some leadership position. Did that answer your question, or couldn't only answer it so? But I think that's my analysis, that a lot of the solution is going to have to lie within our own hearts. Like, okay, maybe this generation, we Prabhupada disciples will do what we can do, but you're going to be here a lot longer. So how are you taking it in, and what are you going to do? Because you're going to have a much bigger movement to deal with that's going on now, like really a lot bigger. And whatever problems we have, they'll be bigger, because the movement will be bigger, or possibly bigger problems. Yeah. How many of you want to be guru? Raise your hand. Yeah. That's the problem. Okay. Prabhupada wanted us all to be guru. So we have to think like that. You think I was thinking, the day I joined, 19 years old, I'm going to be a guru? Of course not. Never think like that. But one day Prabhupada said, I want you all to be gurus. And if we had to think about it, whether we feel qualified or not, the instruction is be qualified, become qualified and do it. Someone has to do it. So you're all going to be facing this, whether it's guruship or temple president, GBC, this or that. You stick around long enough, you're going to be some kind of leader, and people are going to be looking at you and asking the same questions you're asking now. Why is our movement like this? You're a leader. You didn't do anything about it. So, you can think like that.
So it's appropriate to have that belief that someday I want to be able to be a guru or to guide people, but I still...
Siksha guru, Diksha guru, some kind of leader, yeah. That even if you don't want, just the realization that you will be, just by default. That's my experience, because so many of my godbrothers left. Radhanath Swami, Radhanath Swami was not guru. He started Chapati, but that was the temple of Kirtanananda. And so he was just serving Kirtanananda. He wasn't a guru. And those who know Radhanath Swami met him later, and so he has this temple, so many disciples. It was like, how did that happen? And he said, well, it was just so many people above me were leaving, one by one by one. So it was like, I was just down the food chain, and then it was my turn. And I didn't leave, and this is what happened. So, that's his humility, but it's also true. It's just like, if enough people above you disappear, either due to old age or whatever reason, you're the next in line, then people are going to be looking at you. Like, okay, we need a guru, and I guess it's you. I met one of his older disciples, and he's saying, before he was guru, we used to travel and preach, and we'd all stay together, and he'd have us sleep on the beds, and he'd sleep on the floor, and, he was just the brahmachari, and there was no position, but it just happened. It wasn't his choice. It was just, there was nobody to do it. Everyone else left. So you might be somewhere one day, there's no one to run the temple but you. And they're all pointing their fingers at you and said, I think you're the best one to do it. You had no intention. And now you're the temple president. And now you're going to have to think about all the things you're thinking about now, how you would do it. Is that a depressing thought? Scary, isn't it? But it's true. It's true. Yes.
I don't think you meditate on it. You meditate on the guruship or stuff. You just try to be a humble servant.
Yes.
The times come and you are qualified. And if you feel you're not qualified, you don't have to take it also.
Yeah.
Because it can be dangerous for your spiritual life. and for spiritual life of others.
Yeah, but at least then you'd be a Siksha Guru or some kind of mentor. Just because you're senior and you have experience, then it's your duty to share it. Yeah, you may choose not to be a Diksha Guru, but Guru also in the sense of example. Teacher, you know, Hana, when you're 70 years old and there's 20 years old sitting here in the audience, you've got 50 years of experience they don't have. Despite your level of Krishna consciousness, you can give them so much because you've seen it all. And so they're saying, I think of doing this. Don't do it. I did it. It's a trap. Don't marry that guy. I married a guy like that. Big mistake. You've seen it all. You've done it all. So even if you're not guru, you're something. And they're going to need your help. Otherwise, they're going to step on the landmine also. So that's inevitable. That's what's going to happen. Yes?
The reason says that we sometimes see, I mean, again, it's not criticism, but in reality, sometimes you see Prabhupada disciples, or all the people, all the devotees, who are very negative, very critical. So
Yeah.
you better off not associating with them.
Yeah. Well, that may be. It's a tough one because there's so much you can get from them also, but you might get something negative. But if you see a Prabhupada disciple that's critical, let me explain why. In general, that could be. You know, when Prabhupada left, the movement kind of went from the hands of 5,000 to the hands of 11. It was a complete change. And it was like the resources of the entire movement were now in the hands of 11 people, where before they were in everybody's hands. And then there were a lot of problems, and then the movement went in directions which not everyone, if not sometimes everyone, agreed was the right direction. And it became a different movement. And a lot of Prabhupada's disciples were alienated or sidelined. They weren't wanted because they didn't agree or they didn't want to support the system. So some of them got hurt. You know, they're upset. You know, it's understandable. And you know, at least we should understand that they're sincere and concerned. I mean, some are not. Some are offensive, but some are just concerned. They're all very special. So if we can, you know, get the good part without the bad. I had disciples. She just wrote me. She's in Hawaii, and she said, you know, there's another movement there, and they're inviting me to come participate. And she said, you know, like, should I? And I said, I think if you participate, you'll be very happy, you'll be very inspired, you'll be very enlightened, and you'll be very confused.
Spiritual life, personally, it's better to keep distance.
Yeah. That's
You say who it is.
You make your own decision. Yeah. It's unfortunate, but yeah, it may be true in many cases. But if you understand sometimes why the criticism is there, because it's a brother hurting a brother, it's a deep wound, then, okay, I'll tell you a story. You will like the story. On the count of 3, wake up. 1, 2, 3. So I had a godbrother here who was, he visits Mayapur, Vrindavan every year, and he was a GBC, he was a sannyasi, a very influential and powerful person during Prabhupada's time and very close to Prabhupada and did very intimate service to Prabhupada. And we were standing in the back of the temple, and there was a kirtan going on, and he was commenting on that the kirtan is not the way it should be. It's just, it was out of hand, not standard the way Prabhupada wanted it like that. He was complaining. And then he started criticizing a guru who he felt was responsible for not training those devotees to do it right. And then he said, you know, it's because they don't ask us and call us in to help that these things are going on. So he was just going on and on and on. And it was a little nasty. And there was another devotee that was talking to me when the other devotee showed up, and so he was listening to the conversation, and he was having, it was difficult for him to hear it. And so after the conversation, I had to explain to him what was happening. I'm saying, this person is a leader. He was a leader of ISKCON, and now he's nothing. He's got no power. The movement, from his vision, was usurped by 11 people initially, and everyone else sidelined. And feeling that's not what Prabhupada wanted, Prabhupada wouldn't be happy, and now no one listens to me. And so he actually wasn't criticizing per se. He was actually crying. And I heard him crying. That's what I heard. I didn't hear criticism, I heard him crying. That, this service was taken away from me. And he's really saying, I want to be, but I can't be. There's no place for me now. So I explained that to the other devotee, and I said, if you hear the crying, you won't hear the blasphemy. If you don't hear the crying, you hear the blasphemy. So if you hear the crying, you will feel sympathy rather than offended. So you will understand why he's upset. So I think that's important. Because when people blame, it means they're crying out for recognition or affection or something. And so if we recognize that, we may not take offense, even though they're making offense. But it's not really offense, it's really just them crying to be acknowledged, heard, appreciated. Like that. And so it was his frustration, which I understood.
Is it let's say, good excuse or good example? Because, nothing can be taken from us in a sense unless Krishna takes it away from us.
Yeah.
And, there's so many conditioned souls. We can always choose to do something.
That's true. That's true, and that's how you should think about yourself.
Yeah.
But in dealing with another person, you might want to look at, what did ISKCON do that created that problem that couldn't engage this devotee who could do so much, and how we could have done it better. I think that's a healthier way for us to see. It's more compassionate. And in some cases, it may be that we could do nothing. That personality would not be able to fit in within ISKCON. And he's okay. He doesn't want to fit in. He's okay. He gives classes, but he's not really part of it. But he's a well-wisher. He's at the temple. He's not going anywhere else. So some of these things are just realities, contextual realities, social realities. It's just how it is. But when we see these things, we want to think, how can we avoid this from happening for the next generation? Because it could happen to your generation. Your spiritual master goes, all of a sudden divisions. One god brother becomes guru. Some devotees don't like him. He starts alienating. That's what happened. It could happen again. So we have to think how to prevent that. It's going to be interesting when all the Prabhupada disciples are gone, isn't it? It's going to be interesting. It's going to get a lot better, or it's going to get a lot worse. Depending on us, it will go one way or the other. So, if I were you, I'd become very Krishna conscious and very fast, because that's going to help the movement and help the world. And help you also. Maybe the most difficult order Prabhupada gave us was not for regular principles, 16 rounds, distribute books, get up at 4 o'clock. It was to cooperate. That was probably the most difficult instruction. So get yourself ready to cooperate. Do what you have to do internally to be able to do it, to do that work, and not give up, not blame, be sympathetic, compassionate. Then we'll be doing good.
I think that's what they get in the corporate world. They appreciate team players and see how to encourage them, how to create leaders.
Yeah.
It's bubbling all over.
Yeah.
And that's what we should exemplify.
Well, it's just the way the world works. See, devotees loved Prabhupada so much that they would do anything for him. Anything. You know, you probably heard the story. Prabhupada was going, I think he was going to Amritsar, and they stopped in Delhi on the way to Amritsar, and they got off the train for a while, and a man met him at the train station and said, you should start a temple in Delhi. And Prabhupada was with, 8-10 devotees. And the man said, I have a dharmashala, they can stay there. And so Prabhupada said, you, stay here, start a temple. He didn't give him any money, nothing. Okay, now put yourself in that situation, and your spiritual master asks you to do that. This is 2017. Like, we should do a play. It would be great. Guru Maharaj, this is like spiritual abuse. This is guru abuse. You can't, it's like, isn't it? Right.
The Guru gives you direct orders.
Yeah. You can't. Well, how are we going to live? We don't have any money. This is like, what kind of guru are you? You can't expect disciples to do this kind of. There'd be a little of that, or a lot of that. And they just did it. They loved Prabhupada so much. So leaders have to endear themselves to their followers, and their followers will make sacrifice. That's just how the world works.
We just had the leadership seminar recently, and they showed us a movie about the Taj Hotel when the terrorists, I don't know if you've seen it, the terrorists were attacking Mumbai. Several of them armed went into the Taj Hotel. It's a very, very prestigious hotel. And the staff, they had such, leaders were so endearing to the staff. The staff were ready to sacrifice their own life. They didn't leave the hotel. They stayed to protect the customers. It's all, it's all non-Krishna conscious, all sensual. But the relationship was such that neither leaders left, nor the staff left, though they could escape and just. So I was thinking, if materialists can create such a, sense of.
Yeah, well, there's a problem. At least I think this is the problem. We look at other companies and we see things that look Krishna conscious, or at least look like we should be doing that. And we're not doing it, or we're not doing enough of it, and we get confused. It's like, why is it that they're doing it and they're not devotees, and we're not doing it? And I think one of the reasons is because we think that automatically, if we're Krishna conscious, we would do those things. And they know that unless you consciously establish that culture, people won't naturally do it. So we don't consciously establish the culture because we think, well, that'll just happen naturally. And then when it doesn't happen naturally, we get confused. Why does this other organization seem to be more evolved in a certain area? So they seem to be nicer and more compassionate because they cultivate it. In the books I read about cultivating culture, they're intentional about creating the culture, and they always talk about, this is the culture, this is what we want. It's continually spoken of. So people are, and if people don't fit in that culture, they won't stay, and they won't be hired in the future. So I think that's an important thing to take note of, that, we have to intentionally make adjustments, even though those things should be there according to our scripture. But they're not. And if they're not, we have to make sure they are somehow or other. We have to make this. So that's what the other companies do. Isn't it? You agree?
Yeah. Also, you look at Nath Swami, he always speak about devotees, serving the devotees, being servant of the servants, like throughout the whole, and they establish this culture.
Okay, I have a story about Chaupati, which will be a sequel to what you just said. I gave a program in Mumbai, and some of the senior people from Chaupati were there. And I think they asked me to speak about forgiveness, or that topic came up. And then, probably the most senior, he was almost 80 at that time, it seemed. So he came up and he said, this is a very nice talk on forgiveness, and we've heard all these things from our spiritual master because he's always talking about it. Like all the time. And in the books on culture that I read, they said if you want to establish culture, you always have to talk about your culture, what it is. And you have to recognize it and honor people publicly when they manifest what it is you want in the culture. So then they invited me to the Bhaktivedanta Hospital to give a workshop on forgiveness, and it was to start at 10. But then what happened was a lot of the people coming were still on duty and they weren't going to come to 11. So I said, well, in that case, I'll just talk philosophically and tell stories before we do the exercises. But in our workshops, we have everybody write down the issue that they're dealing with on a piece of paper, and when they want to give up the resentment, they come and tear the paper up and they put it in we have a little fire pit. They'll put it in, so, exemplifying that I want to let it go. So I said, well, at least write your paper down. Right? So then I started telling stories and explaining how forgiveness is the mode of ignorance, and if we're sattvic and brahminical, that's our nature, that's how we should be, it pleases Krishna, etc. I don't know, there were like 30 people there. And then, the other people came at 11 o'clock. And I said, any time during the lecture, you can just come up and tear your paper, even while I'm talking. Within 1 hour, 80% of the people had torn their paper, which is unprecedented in any workshop I've done. Usually it takes to the second day. We're talking like we're in 10, 12 hours before. And then I realized, because Maharaj had spoken so much about it, it was in the culture, it was in the blood, and it was so easy for them. Now, this is not a criticism, this is just an objective analysis. Like I'm saying, I go to other places where it's not so easy, because it wasn't spoken about. That was not the culture in that temple. Very interesting, isn't it? I mean, I was shocked, actually. And it was genuine, because they had been primed. So I was just like, the cap was almost off, and I just went, boom, and it came off. I mean, it was a good talk. I mean, it had to be, something, I had to say something good. But it was really, they received it. They were primed. So that was an amazing example, because I've done that workshop 30 plus times, and I've never seen it like that. So I put 2 and 2 together and I said, yeah, this is culture. So, how do we end up on that? It's supposed to be Naamapradha.
You have this culture, you will not commit
Yeah, create the culture, that's it. Create the culture of avoiding 10 offenses. All right, so I will tell you something else that I find fascinating in studying culture. When I'm teaching something, as I said, in an environment that already exemplifies the culture, the people in the audience, they get it very quickly because they're seeing examples of it in their temple. So when I'm talking about it theoretically, they can relate to it practically. But when I go to situations where the culture doesn't exemplify what I'm teaching, it's very difficult for the students to understand it because they're not seeing it. So teaching it is much more difficult. So creating a culture in which we exemplify principles is a better way of teaching than teaching into a culture that doesn't exemplify it, because it makes it very difficult. Have you ever heard a class and there's some standard that's talked about, and you look around and you think, I've never seen that standard in ISKCON, so you write it off as impossible, isn't it? It's like, it's a teaching, but there's no place for it to go in and register because you don't see anybody living it, so you think it's actually not for us. And I believe that's what happened to Christianity. Because the Christians say only Jesus could actually follow what he taught, because at some point they didn't find anybody following it. And so they rationalized that we can't follow it. We're too fallen, and all we can be is forgiven. That's my analysis. And I think it's accurate, because the same thing happens to us. So that's the power of culture, from what I've seen. Create the culture then the teachings automatically are understood through the culture. Don't create the culture, create the teachings. It's very difficult to understand because you won't believe that it can happen.
I was reflecting on your solution when you saying making this workshop. I was just reflecting in my mind. We need to find hopeful individuals who are really good leaders. They'll make workshop with them, and they create culture in the places. That may be because after workshop, after some time it dwindles away. If you're not supported.
Yeah, that's true. But no, I agree with you. But there's an additional thing. If the workshop is aimed at transformation, to actually alter perception, then you come out with a different perception, that won't change. So there are levels which are permanent changes. Or alter beliefs, you come out with a different belief, a different attitude. Yeah. Let's say you take people with a certain attitude towards something that isn't healthy. If you can change that within, because you have 7 days, 5 days, all day, you can change it. And you change it on a deep level where now it becomes a samskar. Then it's good. But definitely leaders should participate and have skills. Or leaders should have people in their temples that have those skills to be able to work with transformation on deeper levels. Otherwise, there are a lot of people we won't be able to help because the problems are not going to be resolved just by philosophy. There are deeper issues. All right, you're all hungry, tired, thirsty, bored. Wow. You've all sat in one place for 3 hours. How'd you do that? That's amazing. So, we should take a break? Is anyone dying to say something or ask some question? Otherwise, we'll take a break.
Oh, I mean, I'm not dying to ask. It's more like an observation. I feel like people, one of the reasons people become attracted to ISKCON or any group, we were talking about the corporate sphere or whatever, it's because we want to feel like we belong, psychologically we want to feel like we're part of a community. So I think that's another goal that we need to have in ISKCON is that to welcome everyone. And sometimes we can be so strict and fanatical, if you don't follow the 4 regular principles, then you're not part of the group. But embracing everyone for their fault.
That's a big challenge. She was saying that we have to make people feel welcome on any level of spiritual advancement so they can become part of a community and not feel they're lesser because they can't follow all the principles. The challenge is for us individually to imbibe that consciousness because as conditioned souls we tend to judge, and people don't like to be judged, they like to be loved, right? And it's hard to love someone you're judging because they're actually two different things. But I think part of the problem is a social problem in that we don't have a vast social structure, so we don't, people only fit into a small group. And so, if you're not ready to be initiated sooner or later and follow these principles, we don't know what you are and how you fit. And you make us feel uneasy because we don't have we don't know what to call you. Are you an offender? Are you a devotee? Are you a mudha? Are you a karma? What are you? You like the philosophy and you don't like to chant Hare Krishna, and you have a girlfriend. What are you? And you have a shaved head and sika and an Om tattoo. I can't figure you out. I don't know what to do. So I'm judging you. I can't go to the books and figure you out by the books. That's the problem we have. We don't know where these people fit in, and it makes us feel uneasy. This guy is going to contaminate other people. I had an experience where I was dealing with some people, professional people, highly placed, and these people potentially could become quite renowned in the future. And they were really appreciating everything I was saying, but I couldn't envision them as practicing Krishna consciousness, but I could envision them as adopting it as a philosophy. like embracing it. I believe this. But as a lifestyle, that may be difficult for them, or not much. Maybe some kirtan here and there, maybe reading here. So I think there's a whole world of people like that. And if we only have the little circle, then we're going to keep all these other people out because we can't figure them out. We don't know what to do. And I think a lot of our books and a lot of our preaching is addressed to the inner circle. And therefore the outer circle, then your Eckhart Tolles, your Deepak Chopras, your Wayne Dyers, they get them. And we don't get them because we don't know what to do with them. But if we would speak to them and just go, this is just the way the world is, this is karma, this is reincarnation, then yeah, they'd be fine. But now we're like, yeah, but you still eat meat, so I don't know what to do with you. Or you chant Buddhist mantras and not Hare Krishna, I don't know what to do with you. But no, I believe Prabhupada. Well, if you believe Prabhupada, no, it's like, that outer circle, we're not there yet to deal with it. So that creates, on our part, makes us judgmental, because we're judging, are you in the inner circle, are you in the outer circle? And if you are in the inner circle, how come I didn't see you at Mangal Arati? What's wrong? And I don't want to talk to you. And Hannah's like, Mahatma, I didn't see you at Mangal Arati. Isn't it? So these are personal things we have to work out, because if we don't work it out individually, there's going to be a lot of prejudice and the judgment and the movement, and people are going to feel it when they come, and they're not going to want to be part of it.
It's not really up to us to figure any one person out, though. That's not what it's about. I've got you put in a box, so it's all good, whatever.
Well, what I was saying is, I agree with that. What I was saying is, we're trying to figure out, not necessarily psychoanalyze anybody or figure them out, but we're trying to figure them out for ourselves. How do you fit in this society? Because I don't see like an ashram for believers that don't practice, or people like to chant Hare Krishna and chant Buddhist mantras and go to this guru and also come to the temple. I don't, where do I fit you in my conception of a ISKCON social structure? And then I mean, you just went and heard, you went to a kirtan with Krishna Das. Oh my God, that's so sad. I don't know what to do with you now. I don't know if I should let you in the temple anymore. That kind of thing, that we're not clear on that. Who are you? As opposed to, our job is to educate and facilitate anybody, and so we don't have to figure you out or we just engage you, and then you take it as you take it. Then we could stop the judgment. But if we don't do that, we're just trying to judge to figure out if this person is worthy to talk to anymore, isn't it? Or what are you anyway? You agree? And then a lot of initiated devotees fall in that position. They got initiated, then they realized that maybe that was too much for them. And then we have to judge them also. Yes?
I just wanted to, say that as long as we understand that it's a mission of compassion and a person coming closer to Krishna always benefits, whatever little ability we can keep liking devotees, liking prasadam, liking kirtan, because every day, with every minute spent in association of devotees, person eternally benefits, and we understand this is a mission. Saving conditioned souls. Yeah. Not everybody would join, not everybody would shave their head, but if they like the devotees and devotees don't judge them, nobody loses out.
Yeah, well, it's exactly true. And I think the problem with that is we have standards. And so we tend to, many of us tend to default to the standards, So you were chanting 16 rounds, now you're not. Immediately, I go into judgment mode, right? So this girl wrote me a letter, and she said, for these reasons, I stopped chanting. And she said, I spoke to my Siksha Guru, or my former Siksha Guru, I spoke to this one and that one, they all told me to chant 16 rounds, and the result of them telling me and being happy was I chanted no rounds. So then, okay, all right, so we don't put her in the inner circle now. We just keep her wherever she's comfortable. So I said, well, you should really chant because you want to. It has to come from your heart, not from someone feeling it. And then she wrote me back the next day and says, I'm starting to chant again. Because I wasn't dealing with standards. Well, she wasn't initiated, so it was easy. There was no need for standards. She didn't live in the temple. But the other ones were looking at the standards. No, you were chanting 16, and now you're not, and you were trying to be my disciple, so you should be. And so that default standard, it's hard to just, for a lot of us, it's hard to neglect it, or we think it's being unchaste or Prabhupada. So I think it takes a little bit of a more liberal mentality to say, well, if you can't chant, it's okay, just work on it and see what you can do. At least that's my observation.
I think when you go with a book, it makes, it's much easier to be impersonal. Just a standard, you fit or you don't fit. Yeah. You look at every individual, see how you can help this individual to come one step higher. Yeah. That's a thoughtful.
Yeah, definitely. If we have that vision, we'll make a lot more people Krishna conscious. But I think maybe in our minds we see a certain class of people, they can't be devotees because we have standards. But they could be devotees if we have a different conception of devotee. At least that's the way I think, and that's the way I'm trying to preach, and I'm trying to I find it easier to get into different rungs of society because I don't have those standards for these people. I want to work on the standard of this is true. Do you see it? Do you accept it? Do you understand it? Not that this is religion. This is just the way the world works. And that's been I think that's a fantastic way to relate to people. Just explain how things are. And isn't it true? And I'll go, yeah. But it's a spiritual law. This is just how it is. And you can see it and they acknowledge it. Then I think, so now they're becoming Krishna conscious. They're accepting. And they don't even know they're accepting. It's just they're accepting what's true. But, I've been around 48 years. It's easier for me to do that now than if I were a devotee for 5 years. In 5 years, if a brahmachari puts on white, it's like you go to a crying ceremony. You're ready to how can you do that? You're so rigid, Isn't it? It's like it's almost as bad as a funeral. Prabhu, might as well kill yourself. 2 years. Isn't it?
I think it all depends on association. If from day one in Krishna consciousness we have association with Mahatma Prabhu, by the 5 years you are as good as 48 years.
That's also true. Yeah. But I also think that many devotees understand these things. But if the culture doesn't reflect that, it's hard for them to feel comfortable in their own intuition because they'll feel like maybe it's just my mind. Maybe this is wrong. So the culture has to reflect that lack of judgment, and then it's easy for us to be okay with people on different levels. Yes? No? Maybe? Yeah. Possibly? Could be?
I think brain's not working.
Yeah, okay. I think we need kirtan, right? Yes? Okay. Well, thank you for patiently listening. I hope I was of some help to your Krishna consciousness. And always remember that Naamapradha it's hurting Krishna's heart. We don't want to hurt his heart. We want to worship him, love him. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Premanandi Hari Hari.
Thank you, Mahatma Prabhu, very much for spending these 5 days with us. It was very, I think, I reflect everybody. It was very enriching and very transformational also. So I hope that every year you come and raise.
I hope I will be here every year.
We'll pray.
Why don't you all pray for me? We left Mayapur in April. We were here 6 years, and my daughter started college in August. And first semester's finished, and she's doing one winter, spring, summer. There's a possibility that she could go online and take classes, which means we could spend some time here. So why don't you pray? That would be October. No, actually, maybe October. I don't know. Yeah. You can all pray.
Now. Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Prabhupada, Jai Panchatattva, Jai Radha Madhava, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. So 10 minutes, we'll do kirtan.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Take a little break.
Tomorrow we have 64 rounds here in the morning. I mean, students, please come. Anybody who wants to join. Also, we will be here from 5 o'clock if it's not too free.